Again, I'm calling to order Sea Power Projection Forces hearing, Department of the Air Force fiscal year 2020 budget request. Again, we're always kind of trying to, dovetail with the floor schedule, and as the witnesses know, we're going to have a vote called within a few minutes or so. The good news is it looks like it's a one and done vote, so I think we can just keep rolling here. But again, given the fact that it's also a flyaway day, again, member schedules may be also kind of running up against the hearing schedule here today. So in the interest of moving along, I'm going to waive my opening statement and enter it for the record and yield to the ranking member, Mr. Whitman.
I'll also, too, bypass my opening statement and enter it into the record.
Thank you. Okay, well, gentlemen, the floor is yours, and
Chairman Courtney, Ranking Member Whitman, thank you very much for the hearing today and for your interest in the Air Force and where we're going to implement the national security, national defense strategy. And a little different twist, I'd actually like to ask General Fay to begin, because the context of the security environment we're in and trying to make acquisition, my part, deliver for the warfighter, is what we're all about. So to set the stage, I'll turn it over to him and then tell you what we're doing to make the Air Force's acquisition system competitive in this century.
Good morning, Chairman Courtney and Ranking Member Whitman and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for having us here today to provide testimony on Air Force force structure and modernization. I'm Lieutenant General Tim Fays, Dr. Roper said, Deputy Chief of Staff responsible for strategy, integration, and requirements on the Air Staff. I want to take just a quick minute or two to discuss the strategic environment facing the United States Air Force. As the National Defense Strategy tells us, we face an increasingly complex global security environment, characterized by overt challenges to the free and open international order and the return of long-term strategic competition. Our United States Air Force must be ready to compete, deter, and win in this complex and evolving security environment. We must defend the homeland, provide a safe, secure, and effective nuclear deterrent, and be able to defeat a conventional enemy while we also deter opportunistic aggression in another theater and continue to disrupt violent extremists. And the Air Force must be prepared to do all 5 of these missions every single day. The National Defense Strategy drives how we design and modernize our forces and highlights the need for a larger Air Force. As the bipartisan National Defense Strategy Commission stated in its final report, the United States needs a larger force than it has today if it is to meet the objectives of the strategy. The Air Force, Navy, and Army will all need capacity enhancements. Additionally, the same report acknowledges that the Air Force will need more stealthy long-range fighters and bombers, tankers, lift capacity, and intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms. The Air Force analysis aligns with the conclusions of the National Defense Strategy Commission. We look forward to your questions and discussing the way ahead for our Air Force with you all today. Thank you.
Thank you, General Fay. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Whitman, distinguished members of the committee, during this period of our national security, acquisition really has to have a different mindset. Gone are the days of dealing with violent extremists, at least that being the only mission we're doing. It will continue into the future, but our focus needs to be on competing with peers again. And that requires regaining a competitive mindset in acquisition. Days and weeks count. We have to speed up the pace at which we deliver advanced capabilities for the warfighter. And though that may not see the erosion of our dominance today or tomorrow, it will eventually if we don't play the long game in Air Force acquisition. A major focus over the past year has been speeding up the pace. We simply cannot hope to keep our dominant edge if the rate at which we field capabilities is slower than our opponents. With authorities that you've given us, specifically Section 804, and the ability to tailor our 5,000 programs, we've removed 78 and a half years of unnecessary schedule from our programs. This is time that would be wasted on things that are not value added for delivering for our warfighters, and the demand signal from our warfighters could not be higher to deliver faster and give them options they do not have today. In addition to speeding up the acquisition system, we're trying to bring in new and better practices that let us do things smarter. We've had very successful competitions over the last year that have produced over $15 billion of savings. And although we're very proud of that in acquisition, the kudos should be equally shared with our MAJCOMs and requirements owners. They set the bar where we can have strong competition and see the cost savings from them. We're also pursuing digital engineering more broadly. It's a new technology that allows us to have more validated, more confident designs that can move into production. Our ground-based strategic deterrent program is leading the charge. Its digital models are simply eye-watering. They allow us to do millions of design trades in a single day, understanding how a design could change performance, could change cost. They've set such a high bar, we're starting to rotate junior acquisition professionals through that program. So as they become future leaders, they have this mindset of what digital engineering could do for future programs, reduce cost and make us a more confident buyer. And we're very proud of the work we're doing to work with the entire industry base. It's been long known that the Defense Department has had a difficult time working with small businesses, especially commercial tech startups. Last week, we did a pitch day in New York, a completely different thing for the department, where we had small businesses in to pitch their ideas. And if we thought they aligned with our mission, we were able to award them a contract and pay them in less than 15 minutes. That is an unprecedented shift from the 3 months it takes us today. We cannot compete and win in the long term if our acquisition system is not connected to the vibrant tech industry base in this country. And that industry base is not just defense. It is now commercial and dual-use companies. We must learn to work with them and work at their pace, or we risk our future superior edge. And I'm delighted to say that the experience we had last week, awarding 51 contracts worth $8.75 million in a single day, has set a new bar for us. We do not want small business to be small anymore. It is a strategic endeavor for the Air Force. And finally, we're all familiar that 70% of the life cycle cost of a program is in sustainment, but we've put very little technology into that area of the Air Force. We've created a rapid sustainment office, a new program executive officer, specifically to inject high-tech technologies into the business of sustainment. And in less than 4 months, I'm delighted to say they are additively manufacturing a variety of plastic and metal parts for airplanes. They're using cold spray technology to fix parts at the depot instead of scrapping them. They're using over 140 predictive maintenance algorithms on the C5 and B1 that allow us to predict maintenance issues before they occur, saving cost and increasing readiness, and are using lasers on robots to depaint aircraft, saving over $1 million per stripping job. This is just a sample of what could be done in sustainment if we continue to bring commercial technologies in. We need to do all of these things well if we're going to compete and win in the long term. We can't imagine winning if we're not fast. We can't imagine winning if we're not working with the entire industry base. And if we're going to afford a cutting-edge future Air Force, we must lower the cost of sustainment to afford it. So expect over the coming year us to focus on these 4 pillars and to keep your committee apprised of our progress. Thank you again for the hearing today and for your interest in our important mission, and thank you for your service to this country.
Well, thank you to both witnesses. Again, the vote was called during the opening statements. Again, we'll try and see if we can keep rolling along, but if not, if we don't get another member from my side, I think we may have to just take a very brief, very brief, just recess and come right back. Obviously, this subcommittee has been wrestling with the issue of tanker for about 3 or 4 Congresses, if not more. And I know, Dr. Roper, you made a visit to Boeing earlier this week. I guess one sort of threshold question is, given the news that the 737s were grounded yesterday and the frame for tanker is a Boeing 767, if you could just kind of comment about whether or not the Air Force is looking at any kind of similar characteristics of the 2 planes that, again, the Air Force is maybe concerned about given, again, recent events.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I was at Boeing earlier this week on Monday with General Miller because we've recently had to shut down the line due to foreign object debris on the aircraft. So these are things like trash, tools, nuts and bolts that are simply unacceptable to have on our airplanes. General Miller and I walked the line, both the 767 as well as the tanker line, to see what remedial actions and corrective action plans Boeing is putting in place. To say it bluntly, this is unacceptable. FOD, or foreign object debris, is something we treat very seriously in the Air Force. Our flight lines are spotless. Our depots are spotless because debris translates into a safety issue. We were there to review corrective action plans to fix the root cause, but also the containment plan to ensure that planes coming off the line have been cleaned of debris. I'm satisfied with Boeing's containment plan, and also due to great work by DCMA and our program office. Planes right now are taking on average 5 sweeps to reduce them from this significant FOD issue. But I'm very confident that the plane, once swept, is safe to fly once leaving the factory. In fact, General Miller and I accepted an airplane and flew down to Altus this week. But that is not how we should be accepting airplanes, sweeping them multiple times. They should be clean on delivery. And so we will be increasing inspections, both on the tanker line and the 767 line. We're going to be doing spot checks periodically. We're going to be tracking the reduction of FOD, aircraft to aircraft. And if we don't see progress, then we will have to raise the stakes. I can't speak to any other line that Boeing is running. We do not buy 737s in the Air Force. But I'm confident with our ability to contain FOD, and then the jury's out on whether the corrective action plans will be implemented. Boeing's processes are valid. They will prevent FOD on aircraft. They simply must follow them. And that is a culture and a discipline issue. And so on our Air Force, we expect discipline on our flight lines. We expect the same discipline on the production line for people that make critical aircraft for our warfighters.
Thank you for that answer. So I think we're going to, again, just take a brief timeout here. Hopefully it'll be a 20-second timeout like in basketball as opposed to a full timeout because it looks like, again, it's a one and done. So again, we'll just stand in recess temporarily and hopefully we'll resume very shortly. So thank you. Just wanted to cover an issue which, again, has been another sort of topic over the last 2 or 3 Congresses for this subcommittee, which is that Air Mobility Command recently acknowledged safety issues associated with the legacy 4-bladed propellers on the C-130H fleet and signed off on a plan to upgrade. It's also our understanding that the decision to move forward with these upgrades resides in your 2 offices. First of all, if you could just confirm that for the record, if that's correct, and also what's your timeline to review and approve the upgrades?
So, Mr. Chairman, what I can confirm is, yes, we are two of the folks that are responsible for working through that paperwork, and we're in the process of doing that right now. We were looking at that actually this morning, and we think we're going to be able to expedite getting through that paperwork very rapidly. Just some context, sir, on that issue, if we would. Essentially, what we're talking about is, you know, we put safety first. We're focused on that very much, and we're working very carefully with all the affected parties to make sure we understand exactly where we are on this issue and that we're moving out rapidly to address it and correct it. Specifically, some of the things that we've already done to address this issue and get after it, in addition to what I'll say is our initial actions to make sure we understood the state of the fleet. We did an inspection of over 1,500 of those blades almost immediately, identified 2 that were of interest, and of those 2, 1 was found to be, you know, suspect, and we addressed that right away. And one thing I would just say, these aircraft are in our total force and our reserve and guard components, and some of our most experienced, most effective airmen are in our guard and reserve. These are folks that were on active duty. They did a lot of years, and then they got out, and they continued, a lot of them, to serve. Some of these folks are what we call generational. We've got fathers and sons who've crewed the same aircraft, that they take great pride in them because they are citizens airmen in their community. And we were really pleased with the fact that we had great airmen getting a good look at those props and getting us their opinion. Now, we didn't stop there. We continued digging. We have flown this fleet now for 60 years. We've got 15 million hours of flying on this fleet, so we have mounds of data. And we dug into that data to get after this problem. And as you can imagine, if it's 60 years old, it wasn't digitized, so it might have taken us a little while to get through all that data, but we did. And what we did was we identified that before 1971, and I'm being specific, 1971 actually, the manufacturing process on those propellers was more manual than automated. We changed that process in 1971. To a more automated process. So the propellers manufactured before 1971 we identified as at risk. So we removed those propellers from the fleet. There was about 60 of them that we removed. What I can report to you is we got a report yesterday that 55 of those 60 have been replaced, and that the last 5 should be complete this week. And then we're going to work through the backlog of the supply chain to make sure we get after getting our supplies healthy again, sir.
Okay, just so I'm clear, because, I mean, the Navy's moving forward in terms of replacing the blades with the 8 bladed propellers, and mobility control has said that this is a mission critical effort in terms of replacement. Is that, again, where the Air Force is going in terms of replacement of the blades, as opposed to sort of examining them?
So, sir, what I can tell you is on 3 separate occasions we've worked what I will call a 1067 process, which is a way to move rapidly to make a change to an airplane. And we have already replaced 11 of the blades, or 11 aircraft in the fleet now the blades have been replaced on. And thanks to your help, we've been able to actually get funding to replace another 33. So that are in work. So of a fleet of about 150 of those C-130H model aircraft, about 44 we've already worked through that process. So we are going to continue to work through the 1067 process that we received, I believe, the 21st of February, as rapidly as we possibly can, and assess how we can work with Air Mobility Command, our support program office, our engineers, our guard, and our reserve teammates to get to a satisfactory answer on that.
Great, thank you. I'm going to yield to Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go ahead and yield to the other members to pursue their questions, and then I will follow up after they've had their time. So, yeah.
Congresswoman Luria, you're up.
Well, thank you, Dr. Roper and Lieutenant General Fay. We were recently briefed on the mobility capability study, and what is put out in the budget and the Air Force we need analysis doesn't seem to match for airlift and aerial refueling numbers versus the mobility capability study, which gave a very rosy picture of where we stood on airlift. Can you explain the differences between those numbers?
I can, and it comes back a little bit to my opening statement, is the Air Force we have is too small for what the nation has asked us to do overall. And so when we took a look at those two specific studies, the Mobility Capability Requirements Study and the Air Force We Need study, there was three major differences, risk, timeline, in the scenarios we used to do those studies. For the Air Force We Need study, as you recall, you asked us to take a look at the Air Force we need based on the strategy, unconstrained by budget. So we took a look out to about late 20s, early 30s timeframe. We looked at the operational plans and defense planning scenarios. And we said, what would it take, budget unconstrained, to get to a low to moderate risk force? And so that was kind of what drove us there. On the Mobility Capability Requirements study, they have a different, if you will, kind of charter. They were asked to look at current operational plans today based on the combatant commanders' needs and assess if we are able to meet those combatant commander needs. So my understanding is that that Transcom study concluded that at a higher level of risk than the Air Force We Need study, they were able to meet the combatant commanders' needs at the 479 number.
So just digging a little bit further into that, when you're looking at the combatant commander's needs versus the Air Force we need, was the Air Force we need study using a more limiting O-plan than the combatant commanders, or is it purely in the level of risk that they assumed?
So for the Air Force we need study, because we went out to 2030, we took a look at the current operational plans, but we also made some assumptions based on the national defense strategy of some planning scenarios that we would anticipate having to address in that time frame. In this forum, what I can say is that drove us to what I will say is a larger number of tankers in the Air Force we need study than showed up in the Mobility Capability Requirements study. And that would be expected based on the time frame, the additional scenarios that we looked at out in the 2030 time frame versus today, and also the fact that because we are budget unconstrained in the Air Force we need study and we are strategy driven, we were able to look at that moderate risk force.
Okay. I think what would be really helpful to us is if you could provide a comparison of the two so that we could basically see where that breakdown was and where the risk is taken in the mobility capability study that is not taken in an unconstrained fiscal environment. So if there's a way that you could provide that to the committee, that would be helpful to us.
Ma'am, we'll take that for the record.
Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you. Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as we debate the budget, I think we're basically having a debate over the national defense strategy and whether the budget moves forward towards implementing that strategy. And I think one of the underappreciated conceptual shifts in the national defense strategy is what I view to be a move from reliance on deterrence by punishment, particularly strategic deterrence by punishment, to conventional deterrence by denial. And I think most of us would associate the Air Force with the former rather than the latter. And so to the extent you agree that there is a lot in the NDS about denying our adversaries, China foremost among them and Russia a distant second, the ability to achieve their objectives in real time or at least degrade it or raise the cost of the first shot. How do you think about this shift as it relates to the Air Force's role in the joint force, the platforms you buy, the concept of operations that you develop?
Sir, so the way I would address it is the Air Force is actually extremely well postured to support the joint force, kind of in what I will say is this complex security environment. It's going to be characterized by great distances. It's going to be characterized by rapidity, so we got to move fast. It's going to be characterized by volume of fires. It is a very different concept than we've been operating in the last 20 to 30 years, where we have had uncontested environments, where we've had time to build up bases that are secure, that we've had time and ability to operate across domains that are essentially we have total superiority over. So what I would say is In the work, the force design work, and in the good acquisitions acceleration that we're seeing from my acquisition teammates, that we are working to build you an Air Force that's able to address that security environment and provide that, if you will, ability to deny objectives and deter up front. And if deterrence fails, then to fight and win.
Congressman, for my part, I am a big proponent of the National Defense Strategy. Before joining the Air Force, I got to serve on the steering committee for it and write portions of it. So I'm a believer that we have to treat our peer competitors seriously. What we have to be able to bring to the table on the acquisition side of the Air Force is a competitive mindset, because our adversaries are not a fixed target. They are moving, they are evolving, they're able to build systems that are commensurate with ours. So we can't just build an Air Force that defeats them. We have to be able to build one that competes with them over time. That means being able to field things faster so that our adversaries have to react to us and not us to them. It means that we have to be able to explore high-tech concepts again. So this is a big shift away from where we've been dealing with violent extremists. I'm very happy with the first step that the Air Force has taken. I'm happy with our ability to speed up the acquisition programs. But this is a first step. This will be a long journey over decades. And so we have to adopt that competitive mindset that every day counts. And the great thing that we have working with our requirements owners and MAGCOMs is that we're in lockstep. Time matters. Let's impose cost, create conundrums, deny objectives, which is very different than trying to defeat every piece of force structure that an adversary has.
I appreciate the emphasis on time, and I appreciate your comments in your opening testimony about the need for a more productive relationship between industry beyond sort of the traditional defense companies and the Pentagon. I guess maybe to ask it a different way, as you saw that conceptual shift towards great power competition and to deterrence by denial, what changed as a result? I mean, what in this budget has increased or decreased to align with that shift?
Congressman, I'll speak from the acquisition side and then turn over to my colleague. The thing that is very different in this budget are the way in which we're buying things. There is broad use of the Section 804 authority to accelerate programs, especially critical programs for the warfighter. There is broad tailoring of acquisition programs to take time out. And the fact that the Air Force has been able to remove 78.5 years of unnecessary time in 9 months speaks to buying a different way. We are getting back into the business of doing things in the real world, vice paper studies, flying before we buy, and trading off performance if it allows us to field on time. And that's done in partnership with our warfighters. So though a lot of the systems are the same, we're starting by buying them differently. And what I hope that you'll see in subsequent budget are big idea, high-tech concepts coming out of our laboratory and into programs of record. If we don't do that, we'll accelerate the current Air Force well, but not be able to replace it with follow-on concepts.
Sir, coming back to kind of what has changed in this budget, what I would call out is our research development, test and evaluation budget line. If you take a look, I think we were 30.9 last year. This year, 35.4, about a 12 or 13% increase, if I'm doing the math right. And what are we investing in? Things like hypersonics, things like directed energy, things like propulsion technology leaps. In addition to the platforms that you're seeing, the B-21, the F-35, high-end fight, I would just also call out our space portfolio. Significant increase in space portfolio, 4th year in a row, because obviously we're seeing that as a domain that is contested. And I think that is about a 17% increase over where we were last year, just in the space portfolio alone.
And the space portfolio is one that is truly benefiting from the rapid authorities. Our new space programs, which are meant to contend with a contested environment, are benefiting from being able to move quickly, begin designing early, and be able to trade off performance to deliver on time. So again, thank you to all of you for supporting those in the past.
Thank you. Mr. Langevin, to be followed by Mr. Waltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary General, thank you for being here. Thank you for your testimony and the extraordinary work you're doing. Secretary Roper, let me start with you. I certainly admire your very forward-leaning approach, leveraging the gamut of acquisition tools and authorities so that we remain the global leader and technology leader. I am concerned, however, that in an effort to field technologies with speed and agility, that we might overlook critical vulnerabilities in our weapon systems. So my question, first question is, how is the Air Force building cyber and EW resiliency into its new acquisitions and modernization efforts to ensure its aircraft can function in a contested environment?
So, Congressman, there are two primary ways. We have increased funding for our cyber red teams, which go in and try to find vulnerabilities so that we can fix them before we field. That's an effort I hope to continue seeing grow, because there has to be a human factor in assessing our systems outside the program office. So I'm happy with the work we've done. I would like to see it go broader. Another big pivot we're making is shifting from waterfall software development to Agile DevOps. And that comes with better development tools, cloud-based tools where debugging and having consistency in code is easier to enforce, vice doing everything in a very tailored boutique fashion. So our cyber resilience should go up as we shift to modern software practices, because we're really leveraging what commercial industry has already trailblazed. We're not the only entity with a huge cyber threat issue, right? Companies like Google and Amazon and Facebook face this all the time. They have shifted to cloud-based tools for a reason. You can develop software faster, and the tools are more secure. So as that becomes the norm in our programs, I hope that we will start, one, seeing the initial vulnerabilities go down, and then our red teams being able to find those exceptions to the rule ahead of us fielding.
So you're building the resilience in measurable ways as well through the acquisition, all stages of the acquisition, and also importantly by design?
Yes, Congressman. I predict that in future, as these things mature, that security will become a fourth pillar in evaluating programs. Cost, schedule, performance, but security. Does it matter if we're buying something that's not secure? So I do think we need to revisit the standards for cybersecurity so that we have a minimum set that we believe is acceptable, or else we're not a buyer. And so I'm hoping that these two initiatives will drive us towards having a minimum set of requirements for any program. And if you can't meet them, then we have to work with someone else who can.
Okay, and that goes both on the cyber and the EW resiliency and
cyber, EW, and supply chain as well, Congressman. I worry a lot about a globalized supply chain. Yeah. It doesn't mean that we have to control the global supply chain, but it may mean that we need to start developing standards for fault-tolerant design. So SpaceX and their Falcon 9 uses a variety of different mission computers and processors and distributes the functionality across them so that if any one component fails, right, the team, the system, the architecture can succeed. It seems like a really good way to design things today when we're spread out across the globe in terms of components, but we don't have a standard in the Air Force. And I think in future we will need one, because we're not likely to be able to thrive if we can't benefit from the global supply chain. So it's supply chain, EW, and cyber, sir.
Okay, thanks. And so obviously the security supply chain is essential as the industrial base continues to grow. How is the Air Force working with industry to ensure that they're part of the solution on cyber or EW?
On both of those, sir, we can't do it alone. We don't make anything in the government, so we're only as good as the industry partners we work with. We have invited industry in towards helping standardize the tools that we're using for DevOps. We are hoping to be able to provide hardened, secure container stacks that industry can use, not just the primes, but their subprime, which is really where we worry. We don't worry as much about the security of a major defense prime in their networks. We worry about their subs and the subs of subs, and we haven't done much to help them. So I think if we can standardize how coding is done and provide secure mechanisms to do it that are government furnished, that's a good first step. And then the second needs to be figuring out how we deal with a supply chain base that has spread out globally. How do we deal with systems that we can't control? And the SpaceX Falcon 9 example gives an insight as to how we might proceed.
Okay. And how is your work? How are you working to develop a culture also that incentivizes risk-taking while accepting smart failure earlier in a program's design? I know my time's up, so probably do that one for the record, if you will.
Mr. Chairman, that is an important question. Would you mind if I took a minute to answer it? Go ahead. I appreciate your forbearance, sir. I'm glad you asked that, sir. Risk-taking is everything. Right? If we don't get the risks that fail, we're probably not getting the ones that succeed. We recently created an award in the Air Force for risk-takers who don't succeed. It's called the Spectacular Learning Event Award. and we just gave out 3. One to our 500-pound bomb UON team, our Air Force Special Warfare Division UAV team, and our high-power microwave team at AFRL. All tried, all failed, but we learned a lot. Their acquisition path was smart. We need to celebrate those people and not punish them. So I'm glad we have an award in the Air Force, and I hope in future I'll be able to tell you about successive failures that have taught us how to be better acquisition professionals. Thank you for that question.
Thank you. You did that in 56 seconds. Mr. Waltz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yesterday, I introduced legislation to establish a unified combatant command to be known as the United States Space Command. My legislation also repeals Section 169 of Title 10, which was added by Section 1601 of NDAA of the 2019 NDAA. Section 169 authorizes a space command as a subordinate unified command. That authorization is inconsistent with the December 18, 2018 executive memo that directed the establishment of a unified combatant command. This directive from the President was issued on advice from then Secretary Mattis and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs with unanimous support of the Joint Chiefs. The recommendation was made as a result of lessons learned from the establishment of U.S. Cyber Command. Secretary Shanahan reaffirmed the Pentagon's support for the unified combatant structure by sending a letter to Congress requesting the prompt repeal of Section 169. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit that letter from Secretary Shanahan for the record.
Without objection.
So due to these conflicting directives and the importance of establishing a space command quickly, I emphasize quickly, to compete with our adversaries in a growing domain, I'm asking for my colleagues to support my proposal, H.R. 1746, and for swift action by this committee and both houses of Congress. It's important that we move forward, in my strong view, with establishing the command in this fashion as this committee continues to review the legislative proposal to create the Space Force that DoD submitted to Congress last month. Mr. Chairman, I believe firmly that we are with space where we were with aviation in the 1940s and the split off from the Army Air Corps. I think this is a move in the right direction. Mr. Roper, I'd ask you in your FY20 PB, there's resources, there's $72.4 million for the initial stand-up of the Space Force headquarters as this first step towards implementing the longer-term vision. My understanding is funding for the headquarters will include 160 personnel billets to establish the initial elements. Can you just elaborate on why that funding is so necessary as this first step?
Congressman, I think the establishment of the Space Force and the proposal for doing is outside of my responsibilities in acquisition, but I echo your point that the criticality of space could not be higher. No one in this room can live their daily lives without being connected to space-based capabilities. Our space programs are ones that I track closer. I worry about the collapsed industry base in space within the defense sector.
Agreed.
And I'm excited about the expanding industry base and the commercial side of our innovation base. We are emphasizing trying to expand the number of defense companies and their technical capabilities while also bringing in commercial counterparts. The whole focus is to be able to fight and win in space. So while the department focuses on how to organize to fight, Air Force acquisition is fast-tracking every space capability so that those future warfighters, however they are organized, have the capabilities that they need to fight and win.
Thank you. In your testimony, and frankly across, I was just talking to Secretary Esper and General Milley, and I understand where the NDA is going in terms of the shift from counterterrorism and violent extremist organizations to great power competition. I'm worried. We've seen this movie before in the 1980s, post-Vietnam. I am worried about that pendulum swinging too far. Frankly, some of your comments concern me a little bit as well. So I want to ask you about light attack. I sent a letter last month with some of my colleagues asking about what happened to that January RFP for the light attack birds. So in short, what happened, and I'll tell you from my own perspective, being on the ground as a special operator, we need that capability. SOCOM needs that capability. I can't tell you if I had a dollar for every time I called in for support and they were up getting gas, because the loiter just isn't long enough. So where are we going with that?
Yes, Congressman, I echo your concern. We could swing too far in focusing on peer only, but I'm willing to accept as a hypothesis if we're designing for a peer competitor, we should be able to contend with violent extremists. With regard to light attack, from an acquisition point of view, it's straightforward. We approved an acquisition plan to buy the aircraft if the warfighters and operators had a need. But in order for us to release an RFP, we have to have a funding commitment from the Air Force. As the Air Force continued experimentation out in the field, we learned. We learned what a light attack aircraft might do. We learned what modifying existing turboprops might do. We saw that there was a competitive industry base in small jets, specifically based on our TX competition. I think the Air Force learned there's a variety of concepts to explore, not just the turboprop. So we're going to continue the experiment. We're going to buy 2 to 3 of each of the existing planes and continue testing out in the field, and hopefully get the right choice, and it may be a
Mr. Roper, just in the interest of time, we have special operators in 60 to 70 countries every given day. We have people out on the ground that need this capability while the Air Force is experimenting. So I'd encourage you to take another, I would encourage the service to take another hard look at that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yep, Mr. Cisneros.
Good morning to both of you. So I just got a couple questions about our bomber fleet. The B-52's been in service a long time, and it's going to be in service basically another 31 years. The B-1 bomber, not quite as long, but that's going to go until 2040, according to your plan. Have we already started the research and the development of these bombers of the future?
I'll take that if that's all right, sir. As a bomber pilot, I get really excited about the opportunity to talk about bombers as both a B-52 and a B-2 former aviator. What I appreciate, sir, is the fact that this team is supporting us in the recognition that the bombers bring a lot of capability to the joint fight, especially in what I will say is the strategic environment we're going to operate in. The range, the payload, the flexibility they bring to the fight are absolutely amazing and are going to continue to be a critical part of the joint fight for a long time to come. As far as future bombers specifically, what I would just share with this forum is that the B-21 Raider is on track and doing very well, and we're getting very excited about that capability and bringing that to the joint fight. It's on time. It's moved to the next stage into the manufacturing and the design kind of level recently, and we're getting pretty excited about the next steps on that. So what I would say is we're going to continue maintaining a long-range bomber fleet that is able to reach out globally and hold any target on the planet at risk.
And Congressman, the thing that is impressive about the B-21 program isn't just the fact that it's doing well in design. It's recently completed its critical design review, but it's setting a new standard for thinking about sustainment and software and producibility early. So our goal is to have the bird coming down the line and the software is ready to go on it. Our software developers are saying they're going to be ready first. So I think we'll be able to step back from the B-21 program, look at future programs and say, you really should focus on the tail end of the program up front, because by the time your design is fixed, it's too late to get the producibility and sustainability standards that you want. So I want to give a shout out to the team working that program. They're doing a great job.
So when is the B-21 expected to be operational?
So, sir, I can't get specific in this forum, but what I can tell you is it's in the 20s, and we're working very hard to keep that on track, and right now it is on target.
If it's supposed to be the replacement for the B-52 or the B-1 bomber, why are we continuing to hold on to the B-52 for another basically 30 years instead of just manufacturing those or developing a plan really to manufacture those? And I know costs are limited, of course, but is there a plan in place, to kind of...
Mr. Cisneros, if you could just yield for a second, just again for the information of the subcommittee, we're going to be having a classified briefing in April on the B-21, where I think maybe the witnesses might be a little more comfortable to get into more detail. But again, if you want to answer that question, I'm not, but I just want to at least share people that we're going to have a chance to get deeper into this very soon.
Well, sir, one of the things just to clarify is the B-52 is going to be with us through at least 2050. So those 1960, 1961 built aircraft have a lot of good airframe life on them. They've got amazing firepower that they bring to the fight at range, and we are going to be flying that fleet through the 50s. So it's pretty exciting.
It's quite remarkable to think that one of our oldest aircraft is going to carry one of our newest high-tech weapons in future. So the B-52 will be very likely the first carrier of hypersonic weapons for the department. And so I'm hoping I will still be able to be in this job to see the first weapon come off of the bird. It's a great airplane. It can carry a ton of capacity. It's got life left, and we've got modernization efforts to do to extend it into the future. But it will bring the payload capacity we need for the contested warfight.
I yield back my time.
Thank you. And again, we're going to have an opportunity to revisit this very shortly. So Mr. Bergman, and that he will be followed by Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to base my questions based upon the words that I heard both of you say here. General Fay, you mentioned that we need a larger force. We talking product or people or both? What was the frame of reference of that?
So what I would say, sir, the answer to that question is both of the above. As you know, we've been working very hard over the last few years to grow the Air Force. We shrunk too small on the people side to the point where we got down, and I'll use our maintainers as an example of where it really hurt us. We were thousands of maintainers short of what we needed, and that drove terrible outcomes on our ability to fix our airplanes and be ready. And so we have worked really hard to turn the corner on that, and I can report from a 4,000 maintainer deficit, we have closed that gap recently, and we are actually, up to speed on the number of maintainers. Now,
Okay.
they are not.
I hate to cut you off, but because the time, 5 minutes goes very fast.
Yes, sir.
In that closing the gap on your maintainers, what percentage of that 4,000, if you will, do you expect to stay for 20 years or more, or do you break that down with like, going to have first term, what are you thinking? What's the breakdown of the manpower piece?
So, sir, the breakdown of the manpower is historically, and I'm going to use some rough figures that will go back to the record and verify, about 50% of our folks that enlist end up doing about a 20-year career. Now,
Okay,
I
so
want to
you
verify that.
Okay, so roughly 50%. I mean, I think that's probably a fair number. Of the 50% who don't, how many? What would you? And there's numbers out there. If you want to take it for the record, how many of that 50% who don't then spend time in the Guard or Reserve?
And again, sir, we can take that for the record, but it is a significant number, and it's actually really important for us because we have invested in those airmen.
Well, you got you got long-term skill sets that you have developed.
Right.
How do we maintain them over the longest time? It's kind of like the human version of a B-52.
Sir.
Okay, because 65-year-old mechanics can do very fine work on an airplane only because they've done it for so long. It's second nature to them. Dr. Roper, you mentioned that 70% of the program cost is in sustainment. So as we do the testing and the development and then actually, complete the program and put it into action, how then do we monitor the fact, are the sustainment costs staying within a norm, a norm of what we had planned on? Any comments on that?
Yes, sir. It's a passion of mine in this job. I think sustainment is something we've gotten accustomed to just paying for. We pay for readiness, and there's a lot we can do to bring the total operating cost of the Air Force down. One, we should design for it. That's often an afterthought. We design for performance. Programs like the B-21 are designing for sustainability. The next thing we can do is force open architecture into design. We cannot get locked into a single vendor forever. We need to be able to compete parts of it, deal with obsolescence more easily. So we're enforcing open design on our new systems. What we lack right now is a true incentive to motivate industry to want to design for them. They will likely lose money if they give that to us. So we have to have some alternative way of incentivizing that, which we currently don't have. I've actually got an open call to industry on the 26th of April to come in and talk about what would it take. And the final thing is we can shift a lot to our maintainers. If you walk a depot today, you'll see amazing people. You'll see great Lean Six process, but you won't see a lot of technology. So we're transitioning additive manufacturing and additive repair, things that can help us fix things locally so we don't have to kick it back into the acquisition system. All of those, I hope, will bring down the total cost over time.
Thank you. And General Fay, one last one for you. When you're the Air Force Chief of Staff, you got a lot on your plate. And I'm assuming, looking at the career histories of the Air Force Chiefs of Staff, they all basically have served their career on active duty. They don't come out of the reserve component. How does and Air Force Chief of Staff keep themselves informed of the opportunities and challenges in utilizing the Guard and Reserve in your realm? How does that Air Force Chief of Staff know what it's like to be a reservist or a guardsman?
Well, sir, let me start out by thanking this body for the additional authorities and flexibility you've given us as we work to create more opportunities to move airmen back and forth between components, more flexible, in a
Defined
more
career,
flexible way.
I mean, pretty much defined career paths that guardsman or reservist can look at, and that flexibility of the long-term career?
So we have really appreciated that, and we are going to continue to work for that because we know that the future is going to be working to retain those people that we work so hard to recruit. They've got to be able to move in and out of the components based on what's going on in their life. That is just a reality that we're going to have to work with you to make even better. As far as what I will say is I've never seen a total force relationship better in the Air Force between the Guard, the Reserve, and the active component. We work very closely together at all levels. All of us have what I will say staffs that are intermingled. I have a number of reservists and guardmen on my staff. I cannot tell you who they are because they come to work every single day in uniform just along their active components. The same in the airplane, the same on the flight lines.
This is a good testament for the Guard and Reserve, and I'm over my time. I'd let you go on forever, but the chairman then would get mad at me.
No,
Thank you. I yield back.
No, I won't. And that actually is a good train of thought. So next up is Mrs. Hartzler.
Thank you very much, and gentlemen, it's good to see you here, and excited to hear General Fay, your B-2 background in Whiteman Air Force Base, and that your position that you're in right now. Very much appreciated. Excited to have Major Andrew Kusgard on your staff now as a fellow B-2. It was a B-2 pilot there, so. We're glad, and Dr. Roper, it's good to see you again. I'm excited about the focus that you have brought to this as we move forward as far as sustainment and the software and helping get this acquisition program more lean and mean so we can get the platforms we need quicker. But a couple of questions regarding the B-2 and the bomber. So Dr. Roper, as you know, I'm a strong proponent of the Defense Management System, the DMS, upgrade, which is critical to the survivability of the aircraft. We have been funding this, the research. We have been trying to get this out there as quickly as possible, and understand that there's some issues with it, and it's very vital for our survivability. So first of all, can you just give me the status of the program?
Yes, Congresswoman, and I'm a big proponent of the B-2 as well. Still a fantastic looking aircraft.
And performing, not just looks. It looks great, but it performs good.
It set a new standard, and you still feel something when you see one fly overhead.
That's right.
The DMSM program right now, I would say there's good and bad. The good is that there's been a 13% growth in the cost of the program because we've added capabilities in. We've made the system better because of the criticality of the platform to continue giving us the ability to penetrate until we get the B-21 fielded. The downside is that after we passed our critical design review in November, although I don't think we've formally declared it, I predict we'll see a 6 to 8 month slip in the delivery of the capability, simply due to the fact that Northrop Grumman is shifting from waterfall style development to agile. I have a little patience on this because all of our industry partners are struggling with this transition. Other programs like OCX or the ALICE system for the F-35 are also going through these growing pains. So we're going to help Northrop continue this pivot, try to regain as much schedule as we can, but I think the DMS program is really setting up Northrop to try to hit their stride for B-21 coding. So this program is important to me as a dress rehearsal for B-21, so I'm tracking it closely. I visited the vendor 2 weeks ago with General Ray, and we're going to be watching their progress until they get back on track and deliver.
That's great. So you are thoroughly committed to continuing to make sure the B-2 gets this, right?
Yes, ma'am. It's fully funded in our program, and as I mentioned, it's really a dress rehearsal for the B-21, so it has double importance to me.
So with a 6 to 8 month slip, when do you expect the procurement system to actually be on the B-2?
So, ma'am, I think, I've got to give the program office time to come back to me with, no kidding, what's the delay going to be. I expect that we'll see everything in the program slide about 6 to 8 months. I don't expect that there's going to be a disproportionate. This is just simply getting the code done. But let me take that for the record so that I can get back an answer that's informed by the current program office estimate.
Great. I'll look forward to receiving that. Lieutenant General Fay, we're talking about the B-21, and very excited about it, and I've been very pleased that it is on time, it's on budget, and it's progressing. And this is going to be an exciting aircraft. And as a co-chair of the Long Range Strike Caucus, I'm very excited about this capability. And it's been stated by the Air Force that they're going to be based at Whiteman, which we're very excited about, Dyess and Ellsworth. So has a decision been made on the basing order? And if not, when can we expect one?
No, Congressman, a decision has not yet been made on the basing order. What I can tell you is as we decide to retire aircraft and base B-21s, it'll be based on the Air Force Global Strike Commander taking a look at that and telling us when he's got enough B-21s on the ramp and available to in an operational status before we're going to move forward on that. So that's going to be a little while, and so that will be the Global Strike Commander who makes a recommendation to the Chief and the Secretary on where and when.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Hartzler. Now the ranking member, Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank our witnesses for joining us. Lieutenant General Fay, I want to get you to elaborate a little bit more on a comment that you made earlier, and that is the divergence between the OSD CAPE assessment of mobility and then the Air Force we need assessment. There's significant difference there. You pointed to some of that. Let me ask for your assessment of risk there. A week ago, we had General Lyons here from Transcom, and when we asked the question where he said there was significant risk with where we are with the current tanker force structure, and I asked him to elaborate on that. He said that significant risk in their assessment is unacceptable risk. Do you share his evaluation that keeping or not going to the requisite number of tankers that the Air Force projects in their assessment creates unacceptable risk for the Air Force?
Sir, what I cannot do is I can't second guess a combatant commander's assessment or evaluation. He's the one who owns the mission. He's responsible for that. In my role as a headquarters Air Force guy, I'm responsible for organizing training equipment, providing forces for that combatant commander. What I can tell you, though, is what the Air Force we need study shows us is that we need to be bigger in a number of mission areas. It's not just the tankers.
Right.
We're below where we need to be in fighters. We're below where we need to be in bombers. We're below where we need to be in C-2, command and control aircraft, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. So, sir, what I would say is you drag that back into the Air Force we are at 312, with the 5 missions I described that we've been assigned, we are just too small.
Let me go back again to the original question. Do you agree with his assessment that the current force structure for tankers is an unacceptable risk?
Sir, again, I can't speak for General Lyons, and so what I understand...
You would know for your airmen and for the Air Force's request to perform that mission what the risk is to your airmen and what the risk is to the Air Force. So I'm asking for your professional assessment of that.
So what I understand, sir, is there was a divergence between the studies that we've looked at internally in the Air Force that says 479 is acceptable.
Yes.
And the MCRS, the Mobility Capable Requirement Study, which we also understood was acceptable. So what I owe you, sir, is to circle back and understand, because I was not aware that there was a discussion about it was now unacceptable. I believed it was deemed acceptable, so I owe you a come back for the record, sir, of where we are disconnected there.
Well, General Lyons stated that it was significant risk associated with the OSD CAPE assessment of what the tanker force structure would be numbers-wise. Obviously, the Air Force's assessment is different, so I want to get your assessment on where OSD CAPE is with the number that they project and whether there's an agreement with the Air Force that there is significant risk there. And when I asked General Lyons to elaborate on significant risk, he said significant risk is unacceptable risk. So really need for you to define that so that we can use that going forward in our discussions about where we target our efforts in building that capability.
Member Whitman, we will do that. I understand that he also, when he called out it is significant, I was just not aware of the second part, that he deemed it unacceptable.
He did. I asked him the question specifically, would you quantify significant risk as unacceptable, and he answered in the affirmative. So,
Okay, sir.
one other thing, too, which lends itself to that is as we're looking to get to the 479 number and the delivery of KC-46As and the challenges that we're having with KC-46As with cameras and booms, we're going to have to keep KC-135s, it appears to me, longer. What are you doing with modernization and service life extensions to be able to keep KC-135s available for a longer period of time? Because without that, you do not get to 479.
Yes, sir. And just for what it's worth, I always like that, again, as a bomber pilot, I like to call out my tanker brothers and sisters that do just an amazing job every single day. And I cannot tell you how many situations I've been in where they are perhaps the most welcome sight you can imagine on a dark night. So just give credit where credit is due. And sir, our KC-135 fleet is scheduled to remain in the fleet till 2040 and beyond. So what I would say is we are taking all prudent steps to ensure, you know, that we maintain and operate those aircraft in the appropriate manner to make them last through 2040 and beyond. Some of the things that we are looking at and working on in that is in that realm with the KC-135 is some of the communications systems and the way we connect those aircraft and bring them into what I'll say is that larger integrated network, which is going to be so essential for modern warfare in the years ahead, and how we defend and protect those aircraft with a layered approach.
Sure, very good.
Congressman, one thing I would certainly invite you, any member of the committee, to do is to go see the KC-135s being maintained out at Tinker and see the professional workforce that we have that are keeping those planes flying. One thing that we're very excited about as we start moving from reactive maintenance to predictive maintenance, so similar to we all get our oil changed before our car breaks down, we've seen significant benefit on C5 and B1, so predicting issues before they occur. We're very excited about bringing this technology into our tanker fleet so that as things get older, we start being able to forecast things before we have an unscheduled maintenance event.
Well, listen, KC-135's great aircraft, great maintenance crews there, but you know, we talk about the B-52 being old. KC-135, some of those aircraft are even older. So there's a whole element there in modernizing and keeping them maintained. And at some point, even the miraculous work our airmen do, you know, when something is old, it's old, and you can't get past the old in being able to maintain. So
if the Air Force was a hospital ward, we definitely would have pediatrics through geriatrics.
Yeah, there would be. There'd be a lot of patients in ICU. So anyway, yes. Dr. Roper, I wanted to ask another question too. There have been issues with the KC-46A, and as you know, there are several Category 1 deficiencies that are still ongoing, both the camera and the boom. Can you give us a little more definition about what's being done to address those deficiencies? Specifically with the camera, we understand that initially it was a software issue, and then it was potentially a wiring issue. The things that I understand is there may be an issue with the physical limitations of the acuity of the camera in order to be able to take an incident light situation, be able to control that light to give a clear image to the operator. The same with the boom and it not responding well to a lighter aircraft like the A-10 because of the tensioning and the recoil on the boom. Can you first of all give us what is the course of corrective action? And what's the time frames involved in that? Because I think time is critically important there. And then there appears to be, on both sides, a difference in where the liability rests and who will pay for the changes that are necessary in order for both those deficiencies to meet requirements. Can you give us a little more definition on that?
Congressman, I'm happy to do that. I will try to be brief. This is a complicated issue, so I would certainly offer to the committee or any individual member, if you would like a briefing on the remote visual system or the boom, I'm happy to bring it by. It's quite interesting, but pretty dense and technical. The boom is easier. Let me focus on that. Boeing designed to the International Standard 7191, which is common throughout tankers in the world. Subsequently, we've discovered that planes like the A-10 need a much lower load on that boom. So it's 1,400 pounds is the loading on a 7191 standard. We need 600 for the A-10. That constitutes a requirements change. It's the first one we've had in the tanker since inception. So we, the Air Force, are liable for implementing them. It's straightforward. It's an actuator change, and we are already working with Boeing on cutting that into the line, hopefully in Lot 7. The RVS is much more complicated, and Boeing is responsible for it and all other deficiencies on the airplane, both found previously and during IOT&E. The issue is a design flaw. When I was with this committee last year, we were looking at pictures from testing and saying, this is not acceptable. Boeing, bring us another design. They would bring us another design, and we had no ability to know whether it would be acceptable or not. We had no ability to know whether we could accept the airplane and confidently tell the warfighter that that fix would bring the RVS up to snuff. Since then, we started a Tiger team because we found we have tremendous experts in the Air Force on remote visual systems and humans interacting with screens. We were able to shift from looking at pictures to deriving 9 critical performance parameters. These are very obscure things that take time to explain, like dip vergence, depth plane compression, depth plane curvature, which help us understand the math of an RVS. And Boeing committed to bring the RVS up to those specifications that we derived. So they are responsible for doing that no matter what it costs. And we are currently working with them on design options that we will be able to measure in our laboratory before we take them out and install them on the plane. If you are interested in coming out to Wright-Patt, to AFRL, we can take you through our RVS laboratory and introduce you to the scientists who are really driving the design. Sure. So in summary, Congressman, we really have shifted from being in the passenger seat on RVS to being in the driver's seat. The Air Force has more technical expertise on the RVS than industry does right now. So I'm confident that we have the expertise to get to good. Now we have to back it up.
Are the time frames being reflected in this corrective path accurate when the assessment is about 2 years to do the testing and development to get to the final agreed technical fix for RVS, and then 4 years to completely reinstall it on existing aircraft that are coming through the production line and to make changes on current production line? Is that 6-year window, that assessment, is that about correct?
It's for both, Congressman, it should be 3 to 4 years to completely design, implement, and retrofit. That's the downside. When I reached that conclusion with Boeing and had the agreement in a legally binding memorandum of agreement, so Boeing has to meet those standards contractually, then it really became a choice for the warfighter. Do they want the tanker in Boeing's hands while we're waiting for these fixes to be implemented, or do we want it in their hands? And overwhelmingly from the command, they wanted the tanker in their hands while we wait for this fix to be done. Of the 9 things that have to be done on RVS, 5 are pretty straightforward and can be done via software mods. It's pixel remapping, things that can be done to fix the obscure angles that the RVS shows via software. 4 are likely to take hardware. These will be harder, more difficult, and likely more costly. That is what we're working on with Boeing. But I would certainly turn over to General Fay to talk about why would the operator want this tanker with its deficiencies in their hands while we wait for these fixes?
Well, listen, I understand that. I'm not debating that it shouldn't be in the hands of the airmen, and that obviously we need that. What my element is I want some specific definition about the time to completion on corrective action for aircraft being delivered and for those aircraft that are then on the production line coming back out to fully meet the requirements. So can you give me a date or a time frame definitive about when that will be completed so that all existing aircraft are compliant and aircraft coming off the production line are compliant?
For the boom, Congressman, I'm confident that we should be able to do that in about 3 years. We are hoping to have the mod done in time to cut into Lot 7. Then it's the choice for the commander about how they want to retrofit, bringing the airplanes into the depot or doing it in the field. For the RVS, we are still doing the design with Boeing. So we have another 2 months until we lock down on the design. Depending on the number of hardware changes, it'll determine how long it takes. And so I will take, it'll be an extended question for the record, but after we have locked down on the design, I will send a report to this committee on how long it will take to do the retrofit.
Gotcha. Very good, I'll do that. And in the interest of time, I too would like for you to take a question for the record and to give us some more definition too about the B-52 re-engineering program. You heard Mr. Cisneros talk about, depending on that aircraft, for the longest period of time of all our existing bomber fleet. The key is what are we going to do in re-engineering that aircraft, especially making sure that we don't generate excessive concurrency with development, design, and integration. So I want to get an idea on that, because that aircraft is going to stay around. It's those elements, as well as avionics and other modernization, that's going to have to take it into the next 30-plus years.
Congressman, I'd be happy to take that for the record, and I can assure you the B-52 re-engine program has one of the most clever and creative acquisition plans in our portfolio. I would be delighted to share what they're doing that I think is smart and will set a standard for other programs. We'll take that for the record.
I think that's key, and I want to make sure, too, that we're keeping in mind, because we talk about time all the time, and you pointed out as a key element of this is to be able to eliminate that, actually make sure that we are doing things in unison, so you're not, as you said, doing it in a waterfall approach, that you're doing things concurrently. So we're doing integration and design as we go, so time frames are compressed, so we're able to get this into the B-52 and modernize much more quickly than we would otherwise.
Mr. Chairman, would you allow me a 30-second answer to that? Thank you, sir. The big picture thing we're doing is a two-phase award. We're using the Section 804 authority, again, thank you for that, to be able to put the vendor for the engines, we know who they are, on another transaction agreement so they can begin working with Boeing, who owns the aircraft. We don't want to award just based on the engine. We want to know if the engine can be integrated on the airplane. So we'll have one round of evaluation based on the engine itself. They will turn over their digital twin to us as part of the competition, which will be great for the Air Force. We'll determine what fuel efficiency it should give us. But the second round that we'll do for the real source selection will be the engine airplane integration. I think that will pull down the risk of not discovering something in this program and giving the warfighter what they need. The fuel efficiency really matters as an acquisition person. That's saving money, but fuel efficiency is range for the operator. So we're going to get that program right, Congressman.
Great, thank you, Mr. Whitman. Actually, and one last question is reading the testimony on the B1 and the B2, and again, in past years, you know, we've gotten signals from the Air Force that the B2 is going to be retired, and then, so the testimony sort of just suggests that there's going to be almost sort of continued investment in both programs. Can you just state for the record what is there a sequence now that the Air Force is looking at in terms of retirements with either one of those two platforms?
Mr. Chairman, I'll take that one. Right now, the Air Force, what I would say we are doing, sir, is we are evaluating smartly as we're moving towards this. Because this is a number of years in the future, we are assessing very carefully the security environment, the progress of the B-21, the status of both the B-2 and the B-1 and the B-52 aircraft as we move forward, and we are trying to make smart investments with all those factors in mind. So the short answer, sir, is no. We certainly plan and we plan again. That's what we do in the military. So to say right now that I can tell you with certainty that we know exactly when we're going to do what airplanes in what order, I think we would likely be coming back to this committee in 6 months or 12 months when something changes in the security environment, in the maintenance of the airplanes, or in some other factor, and we would probably have to revisit that. But I think the final decision will be the operational capacity of the B-21, and when those commanders, both at Strategic Command and other combatant commanders, are able to look at General Ray, the Global Strike Command commander, and he can assure them he can meet their mission needs.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're making the prudent investments to modernize along with our other systems. So the connectivity of these systems, being able to use different waveforms, having ADS-B out, things of this nature, what we're doing broadly are things that we're investigating as modernization options. For programs like the B-2, we have to keep the ability to penetrate. We can't take risk there until the B-21 fields. That's why there's a major modernization effort. And when you go to the B-52, there are multiple major modernization efforts: the radar, the avionics, the commercial re-engine. So in the hospital analogy, this is like a major knee replacement, hip replacement. So we are definitely getting that airplane back up to where it's going to be in the fight. So I agree with my colleague here. The B-21 is likely to set the pace. If we stay on path, then it will let us start making choices about the bomber fleet. But until we're there, given how complicated the program is and the fact that we have the A-team on it, we really have to make sure that the warfighters aren't taking risk of a complicated development. So I think this is a question we will have every year until we get the B-21 where we can say we know we're going to deliver on time. And right now, we're on a path to do that.
Great. Well, I want to thank both the witnesses and again working with us on the floor votes. Again, as the questions indicate, this dialogue will continue in the future. And with that, I will call the hearing closed.